You know, when you sent over these excerpts from an EMT training module about agonal breathing,
Uh-huh.
I have to admit I was a little bit intimidated at first.
Oh, yeah.
But as I started reading, it became clear that this isn't just for, medical professionals.
Right.
It's knowledge that could literally save a life.
Absolutely.
Yours or mine.
And that's what's so fascinating about this deep dive, right?
Yeah.
We're looking at material designed for first responders,
Right.
but the implications are so much broader than that.
Okay, so let's get right into it.
Yeah.
What exactly is agonal breathing?
Wow.
The source paints kind of an intense picture,
It does.
describing it as gasping, labored breathing,
Right.
often with unusual sounds.
Imagine you're witnessing someone
Yeah, okay.
who's desperately struggling for air,
Yeah.
maybe even making strange vocalizations.
Okay.
It can be pretty unsettling.
Yeah.
But here's the crucial point.
Okay.
This isn't just someone having a bit of trouble breathing. It's a specific, almost primal reflex from the brainstem.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So the heart's not working.
Right.
How can forcing the chest to move possibly help?
It all comes down to the brain
Yeah.
and the brain's desperate attempt to kickstart the system.
Okay.
You see, when the heart stops effectively pumping blood,
Uh-huh.
the brain panics.
Yeah.
It's starved for oxygen.
Yeah.
So it triggers this forceful gasping,
No way.
trying to create a vacuum in the chest to draw blood back to the heart.
So it's like
Yeah.
the brain's hitting the gas pedal
Uh-huh.
even though the engine is dead.
That's a great analogy.
Is that
The source actually refers to it as
HOVA?
the automotive resuscitation system of the brain,
Wow.
which I find incredibly descriptive.
Yeah. Okay, I'm starting to see why this is so dangerous.
Yeah.
People see this labored breathing
Right.
and they instinctively think, okay, they're still alive,
Exactly.
but they're not breathing in the true sense.
Unfortunately, they're not.
It's a tragically misleading sign
Right.
that can lead to fatal delays in getting help.
It can, and the source is very clear about this.
Yeah.
Agonal breathing is the definitive sign of cardiac arrest.
And that means
And that means every second counts.
every single second.
Every single second.
Mistaking agonal breathing for normal breathing
Right.
delays CPR and calling for help,
It does.
which drastically reduces chances of survival.
Drastically reduces them.
Wow, that's sobering.
It is.
So if we see someone gasping for air like this,
Yeah.
even if they seem conscious,
There's no time for hesitation.
okay.
Call emergency services immediately
Right.
and start CPR.
Got it.
Assume it's cardiac arrest until proven otherwise.
The source also mentions something surprising about agonal breathing
Yes.
and survival rates, though.
It seems counterintuitive,
Okay.
but people who display agonal breathing
Yeah.
before and during a CPR
Yeah.
actually have a higher chance of recovery.
Really? I wouldn't have guessed
Yeah,
that.
it's surprising.
Why is that?
It boils down to two things.
Okay.
Firstly, it means that the brainstem is still active,
Oh.
still fighting.
Right.
And secondly,
Yeah.
it suggests that they may have what's called a shockable rhythm,
Okay.
a heart rhythm that can potentially be reset
Uh-huh.
with a defibrillator.
So even though agonal breathing is a sign of a critical situation,
Right.
it's not necessarily a hopeless one.
Absolutely not.
Recognizing it for what it is,
Uh-huh.
a sign of cardiac arrest,
Right.
is
Right.
crucial.
Yes.
But it can also offer a glimmer of hope
A glimmer of hope.
to really understand why agonal breathing is so deceptive.
Yeah.
We need to look at how breathing and circulation work together, right?
Exactly. Exactly. The source uses this really interesting analogy to a car engine.
Okay.
It explains that just like an engine needs a functioning pump
Right.
to circulate coolant,
Yeah.
our bodies need the heart to circulate blood.
Right. And the training module refers to that as factor 1,
Uh-huh.
but then it goes on to factor 2,
Yeah.
pressure.
Yes, because it's not just about the heart pumping.
Okay.
We need the right pressure to keep the blood flowing.
Right.
The source explains that arteries
Yeah.
carry oxygen-rich blood away from the heart at higher pressure,
Okay.
while veins bring the blood back to the heart
Ah.
at lower pressure.
That makes sense. It's like a circuit, right?
Exactly.
But then there's this whole other piece about breathing factor 3
Right.
and how it ties into circulation.
That's where it gets really interesting.
Right.
Every time we inhale,
Yeah.
it doesn't just pull air into our lungs.
Right.
It creates a vacuum in our chest cavity.
Okay.
And this vacuum actually helps draw blood back to the heart.
Wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
So breathing isn't just about getting oxygen.
Right.
It's like a built-in pump for our circulatory system.
Precisely. The source emphasizes how crucial this is
Okay.
for keeping the whole system running smoothly.
Uh-huh.
Every breath helps fill the heart with blood, so it's ready to pump it out to the body with the next beat.
Okay, so let's bring this back to agonal breathing.
Yeah.
If the heart isn't actually pumping,
Right.
but the brain triggers this gasping reflex.
It's like the brain is desperately trying to crank the engine.
Yeah.
Even though the battery is dead,
Right.
it's attempting to create that vacuum
Uh-huh.
to pull blood back to a heart that's not working.
This automotive resuscitation system analogy is really sticking with me.
It is a good one.
It explains why agonal breathing is so deceptive.
Right.
We see movement,
Yes.
we hear sounds that resemble breathing,
Uh-huh.
and we assume there's still life.
It's a natural assumption.
Right.
But as the source highlights,
Yeah.
it can be a deadly one.
Okay.
Delaying CPR because we've misinterpreted agonal breathing
Right.
dramatically decreases the chances of survival.
Got it.
That's why understanding this distinction is so critical.
So what should people be looking for?
Well,
How can we tell the difference between agonal breathing and normal breathing?
the training module describes agonal breathing as gasping, noisy breathing.
Okay.
It often sounds strained and irregular
Right.
with pauses between breaths.
Uh-huh.
It's very different from the regular rise and fall of normal breathing.
And if we see this kind of breathing,
Yes.
along with the person being unresponsive.
Don't wait, don't second guess.
Okay.
Call for help and start CPR immediately.
Now, the source also mentions something called a hypoxic seizure.
Yeah.
That can happen before agonal breathing even starts?
Right.
What is that?
A hypoxic seizure occurs when the brain is severely deprived of oxygen.
Okay.
It can involve jerking movements or stiffening of the body.
So someone might see that and think, seizure, not cardiac arrest.
Exactly. And that can lead to further delays in getting the right help.
Right.
The key takeaway here is that any unusual breathing patterns,
Okay.
especially in an unresponsive person,
Right.
should be treated as a potential sign of cardiac arrest.
And time is of the essence.
Absolutely. The sooner CPR is started
Yep.
and emergency medical services are called,
Right.
the better the chances of survival.
But the training module does offer a glimmer of hope, right?
It does.
There was something about agonal breathing being linked to more positive outcomes in some cases.
Yes, that's right. As strange as it may sound,
Okay.
the presence of agonal breathing can actually be a positive sign
Really?
in a cardiac arrest situation.
How so?
Well, for one thing, it means that the brain is still active
Okay.
and fighting to revive the body.
Right.
And as we touched on earlier,
Yeah.
individuals displaying agonal breathing before and during CPR
Right.
are more likely to have
Yeah.
what are called shockable rhythms.
I'm not familiar with that term. What does it mean?
It means their heart is in a state
Okay.
where an electrical shock from a defibrillator
Uh-huh.
could potentially restore a normal heartbeat.
Okay.
It's a much more hopeful situation
Right.
than if the heart has stopped completely.
So agonal breathing,
Yeah.
while incredibly serious,
Yeah.
doesn't always mean the fight is over.
Exactly. It can be a beacon of hope
Right.
amidst a very critical situation.
That brings us to what I think is a really crucial question.
Okay.
How do we ensure people recognize this sign
Yeah.
and take action quickly enough?
Right.
The training module seems to have some strong opinions
It does.
about how we typically assess someone for cardiac arrest. It feels like the standard unresponsive and not breathing assessment
Right.
that we're all taught
Yeah.
could be a little misleading in these situations.
Yeah, that's exactly the argument the training module is making.
Okay.
It claims that relying on those two criteria alone
Right.
is too vague,
Yeah.
especially for people without a medical background.
Uh-huh.
Unresponsiveness can manifest in a variety of ways.
Right.
And as we've discussed,
Yeah.
what might appear to be breathing
Right.
could actually be agonal breathing.
So relying on the not breathing part of the assessment
Yeah.
could lead to crucial delays in getting help.
Precisely. And that's why the module advocates for a more specific and less ambiguous approach.
Uh-huh.
It urges everyone to consider agonal breathing itself
Right.
as the primary indicator of cardiac arrest.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to figure out if someone's breathing is
Right.
abnormal enough,
Yeah.
we should focus on recognizing this very distinct pattern
Exactly.
of gasping, labored breaths.
The module really wants to drive home the point that if you
Yeah.
witness someone exhibiting agonal breathing,
Uh-huh.
you should immediately assume they're in cardiac arrest
Okay.
and act accordingly.
Call for help and start CPR without hesitation.
Yes. It eliminates the agonizing over
Mhm.
whether their breathing is irregular enough
Oh.
to warrant action.
Right.
Every second counts.
Yeah.
And this new approach empowers bystanders
Right.
to act swiftly and decisively.
The training module makes a really powerful statement about this,
Yeah?
saying that in these situations, the person's life depends on the actions of those around them.
Wow.
It really highlights the responsibility we all have
It does.
to be informed and ready to act.
Absolutely. Recognizing and understanding agonal breathing
Yeah.
can be the difference between life and death.
So to wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
let's reiterate the key takeaway.
Okay.
Agonal breathing is not normal breathing.
Right.
It's a clear warning sign of cardiac arrest,
It is.
and it demands immediate action.
Immediate.
Call for help and start CPR.
Yes.
Don't hesitate.
Mm-hmm.
Don't second guess.
Right.
Your quick thinking could save a life.
It could.
This deep dive has been incredibly informative.
Good.
And honestly, a little bit unsettling.
Understandably.
But as you said earlier,
Yeah.
knowledge is power.
It is.
And I feel empowered knowing that I can now recognize this crucial sign
Right.
and know what to do.
That's the ultimate goal of this kind of training.
Yeah.
And these deep dives,
Yeah.
we're taking expert knowledge
Uh-huh.
and making it accessible to everyone.
Right? Because you never know when you might need it.
And the fact that this information came from an EMT training module
Yeah,
speaks volumes.
it does.
These are the professionals who deal with cardiac arrest every day.
Right.
And they're telling us this is something we all need to know.
Exactly. It really underscores the importance of
Yeah.
spreading this knowledge far and wide.
Uh-huh.
Imagine the impact if everyone in our community
Wow.
could recognize agonal breathing
Yeah.
and knew to take immediate action.
It's an inspiring thought. So, dear listener, I encourage you to share what you've learned today with your family and friends.
Please do.
Talk about it, practice recognizing the signs, and be prepared to act.
Yes.
You never know whose life you might touch.
Well said. Awareness and preparedness are our greatest tools in these situations.
Until next time,
Duh.
stay curious, stay informed, and stay prepared.